Well, we've got a pair of interesting cases coming up next week that the U.S. Supreme Court will hear. They concern lawsuits against both Google and Twitter, each case individually. And it comes down to whether or not these companies are responsible for terrorists pushing their messages on their platforms. I have to tell you, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I don't know where I would have come down on this. Having seen, having seen the harm done by stochastic terrorism within our own country, I know where I stand now. Let's have a look at the summary. This is an article from Yahoo News. Next week, the U.S. Supreme Court is set to hear two major cases involving big technology companies, with key aspects of the internet on the line with its rulings later this year. Interesting the way they phrase that. First up, on February 21st, is Gonzalez v. Google. The underlying lawsuit was filed by the family of an American woman, Nohemi Gonzalez, who was killed in a 2015 ISIS attack in Paris. The family alleges that Google, which owns YouTube, is liable because its algorithms promoted extremist content to people likely to be susceptible to it. Let's pause there for a second. Lot of normal, decent folks probably won't be aware of this, but ISIS has several magazines which also exist in online form. I think Inspire is one. And yeah, they are terrorist recruiting tools. A humorous anecdote from criminal justice classes is that the vast majority of American subscribers to these magazines are the FBI because they are tracking these folks and listening to what they're saying. However, they do reach a large audience, and they do literally call for people to be terrorists. They are meant to inspire. That is what stochastic terrorism is all about, inspiring people to do despicable things. It is, if you were to translate the language they use, almost indiscernible from Fox News. If you were to print out a transcript of Tucker Carlson's speeches that he gives every night, it basically sounds like the kinds of things said by ISIS. He stops just shy of actually calling it a jihad, but it's the same thing. So you see now how some of this context, or the context in which some of these decisions may make. The context in which some of these decisions will affect the United States. I have to say, though, I think we're long overdue for proper regulation regarding stochastic terrorism online. And if it must begin with holding these companies accountable, that's fine by me. Let's continue this article. The case looks at whether Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act provides protection for an internet platform's automated recommendations. Google argues that it has immunity under the statute because ISIS, not YouTube, was the creator of the videos. Section 230 is the foundational law of modern internet. It was devised in 1996 to encourage the development of internet platforms that would facilitate speech. Anupam Chander, a Georgetown University law professor, told Yahoo News. Section 230 said the internet speakers who say harmful things are to be held responsible for what they said, but the platforms that might carry that kind of harmful speech will not be liable for that speech. The key difference, however, was, and now this is your old pal Jake inserting his beliefs, and bear in mind, I'm not a lawyer. But the key difference I believe here, is that in 1996, when that was written, they were not dealing with complex algorithms. They were talking about relatively simplistic systems. They were talking about what was essentially telecommunications companies. It's as if to say picking up the phone and calling it a bomb threat somewhere would not mean that the phone company was liable. But now when you have algorithms entering the fray, now you have people making decisions, or rather a software program making decisions about what people will see. The owner of that software program may be liable. We will find out. In a related case, the Supreme Court will hear oral arguments on February 22nd in Twitter v. Tamaneh. Relatives of Nawras Alasif, who was killed in a 2017 ISIS-related attack in Istanbul, argued that Twitter, Google, and Facebook should be held legally responsible, alleging that ISIS used the platforms to recruit members and that tech companies didn't do enough to curb their extremist users. Ooh. Sounding more and more familiar, this problem. Twitter argues that the lower court ruling created a statute of impossible breadth, saying that businesses like banks and rental car, just for context, the lower courts ruled against it. Like banks and rental car companies would also be liable if a judge found that they could have done more to eradicate terrorists using those devices. Yeah. I'm fine with that. I am fine with that. Having some responsibility demanded of these billionaires, I think, is in our best interest. Bear in mind, this is a far-right political activist Supreme Court. It's what we're dealing with. The odds that they will rule against these companies are slim. But I will say that even in the event that they find that these companies can do no wrong and that it's impossible for a rich person to ever break the law, even in that case, I'm looking forward to the dissenting opinion. And I think the dissenting opinion will probably be used to shape future legislation once we have a sane Supreme Court. The case concerns the Twitter case concerns Section 2333 of the Anti-Terrorism Act, and whether websites can be held liable for violence connected to their platforms. We've got these two cases, Chander said, in an effort to understand the arguments of both sides of the cases and what sort of implications they could ultimately have on a user's internet experience. Chander broke it down to Yahoo News. I included the link to that article. It's an interesting read, but it essentially comes down to whether or not the algorithm changes, the presence of an algorithm changes the level of responsibility by these companies. Can't tell you where it's going to go. Can't even tell you what you can do about it other than watch out for it. We'll see how this goes. At a minimum, I will tell you this. Getting lefties in office, particularly in the presidency, that gets us judges. And if you want a justice system that is not permanently and irreparably bent in favor of billionaires and their stooges, then you need left-leaning judges. You need judges who actually have an interest in justice. So vote in the primaries, baby. And, of course, vote in the general. And go as hard left as you can to save this country.